Hello and welcome to Discovering True Health, your weekly deep dive into health and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started with today's show, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a lot, and you'll stay up to date on all our upcoming shows. You can also check out additional information on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. All those links are below. Now, the relationship between the quality of our water and soil and human health are directly linked. Deficiencies of micronutrients in soils worldwide are having an adverse effect on our health. Micronutrient deficiencies are currently identified as the main contributors to the global burden of disease, as nearly half of the world's population suffers the effects of micronutrient malnutrition. And in fact, more than 2 billion people suffer from one or more micronutrient deficiency diseases. So today on Discovering True Health, we'll be discussing solutions for many of our current farming issues and how we can help improve the health and quality of our soil. And we'll also be discussing the mainstream media narrative of the water shortage in the US and how tap water and most water we buy at the store is impacting our health and what the best choices of water is for our bodies. And then we'll be learning about a few incredible nutrient-dense superfoods and ancient holistic remedies and their healing potential. So my guest joining me today is Matt Roeske, founder of Cultivate Elevate. And their mission is to bring back information that's been suppressed, that has caused our society to become sicker and weaker, through educating and empowering individuals to rise above the state of fear and realize that there are always solutions. So thank you so much for joining me today, Matt.
Happy to be here.
I love that because I've been saying that's been my mantra for the last 2 months. There's a solution to every problem.
Well, I think that's the thing too, is like they put out so much fear and nonsense all the time. And it's like I was telling somebody the other day, it's like the revelations. It's always the end of days, and it's like, why is it the end of days? Why isn't it something that's positive? It's always this negative. And it's like, we don't need any of that. We need positivity and solutions. And there are so many, like when you really look at it, there's so many solutions in which we can be doing. But a lot of this information has been suppressed for that reason, to keep us in that perpetual fear so that they can try to manipulate us and scare us into things that we don't even need to do, because our instinct would go against that naturally. But when we're in that fear state, we're no longer using logic. So then we get nervous about it, and then we start doing things in which we wouldn't. And that was a simple case of 2020 and 2021 as well, too.
Yeah, we saw that kind of mindlessness happening, people not thinking deeply, and it's also that state of fear, like you're talking about, puts us in fight or flight as well, and that has a whole cascade of physiological issues that it causes, and causes a lot of illnesses as well. So yeah, it's really a big issue, and I'm so happy that you're talking about this. I'm such a big fan of your work. I've more recently come across your Instagram and the work you do, and your website, and the information you're putting out is incredible. And I highly recommend everybody watching and listening to go check out his Instagram and website. I'll post all that below. He's got a lot of really empowering information on there. I'd love to start, Matt, with hearing about your journey and what the catalyst was for creating your company, Cultivate Elevate, and what were some of the important things you learned along the way about health and wellness?
So it started with, we both were sick. We had health issues, and we wanted to basically resolve that. And basically when I was sick at one time too as well, I couldn't figure out what the problem was, right? It was always like, you're allergic to dust, you're allergic to this, you're allergic to that. There's no root cause. Nobody determines the root cause. And so we watched this documentary. This was a while ago. It was called GMOs Revealed. And it's a 22-hour documentary. And I highly recommend every person to look into this documentary. And it really changed the way that we thought about food, right? Originally, I looked at food. I went to Whole Foods and bought whatever they got there and had it, they cooked it, or I bought grass-fed meats or whatever it was. And it was always, it was prepared, or I bought it and I prepared it myself, but I wasn't looking at ingredients, so to say, of what is actually being sold to me, right? I just thought, well, it's here at Whole Foods, it's healthy, right? Like it's got to be good for you. And what I started to realize was that was all a bunch of crock of nonsense, because they were cooking in canola, which is a genetically modified oil. They pretty much used whatever they felt. And I didn't know this until all of a sudden I started gaining weight, not feeling myself, and I'm like, I'm eating healthy. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And then I would still have, maybe it's like I would feel run down, or I'd feel I'd get allergies, or I'd get like tonsillitis, I'd get a sinus infection, I'd get pain, I'd get all these things. And I started to realize that it's all what I'm consuming, right? Everything that I'm consciously consuming every day is actually changing that and impacting my health. And I don't really realize that everything I'm placing into my body or into my home is impacting me at the cellular level. And so when we got into all this, we started changing our diet, started going all organic, started monitoring things, started paying attention to ingredients, started reading labels, started getting into going, if I'm going to put this into my body, I need to know what it is. I need to know every single thing. I need to know what every ingredient is. And I need to be aware, because I'm buying these things. I'm using my money that I'm, working for, and I'm purchasing these things. Then these things should be bringing me a higher level of health. They shouldn't be bringing me down and making me sick and making me messed up and whatever else, especially if you're paying for it, right? Like you go out to eat, you go to a fancy restaurant, and if you're being poisoned the whole time and you're paying a premium for it, it works against you, And so, we started paying attention to, especially to restaurants and places, what do they cook with, what types of foods, blah, 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 because I realized that it's all of this Monsanto chemical toxin foods are all placed in different areas. They might be placed in a restaurant. They might be placed in Whole Foods. They might be placed at a farmer's market. You really have to ask questions and be aware. So what we wanted to do was we created a company to bring forth information and basically, not to say debunk, but remove the blinders in which we've been taught or not been taught, and try to open up the information to something that maybe is outside the box, right? Because I had weight gain issues, I had bloating, I had tonsillitis, I had allergies, I had all these things. And I started to realize that it was just the toxins and foods that I was placing into my body was causing all of these things. It wasn't the dust, it wasn't the grass, it wasn't the desert, right? Because we're both in the desert. It wasn't that. It was fragrance, it was toxins, it was GMOs, it was genetically modified oils, it was citric acid, maltodextrin, sucralose, natural flavors, artificial flavors, xanthan gum, all of those different things, which were the contributing factors to what I thought were, I was just, sick, right? Because that's what they teach. Oh, you're just sick. You just got to recover. Right. And all the thing is
take this pill.
Yeah, and it's always that way, right? And this pill, like I was in a place the other day, and they listed off the side effects. And I laughed. I told the lady while I was checking out, I go, do you hear all those? I'm like, you're better off just not even taking it, because clearly it's like, death, paralysis, so you could lose your limbs, your arms can fall off, like all these weird things. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. How is that going to make me better? And that's what I started to realize is when I used to go in, I used to have tonsillitis all the time, and I never understood it. But once I started cleaning up my diet and getting rid of fragrance, especially anything scented, all of a sudden my tonsillitis just vanished. And it was interesting because they were like, oh, you're allergic to dust. We stick you with the things and you're supposedly allergic to it. And it's like, yeah, because you stuck me. That's why I'm allergic to it. But, I realized, I go, someone's not telling the truth here, and I'm going to figure it out myself. And so we started going on all these different missions, just understanding and dissecting. And when I read something, I dive into it and then try to understand it from every angle. So I was like, something's off here. So we started switching, changing all these different diets, trying all these different things, trying superfoods, trying mushrooms, trying everything to try to see what fits best. Because, everybody's blood type is different. Everybody's genetic lineage is different, and everybody resonates in a different way. So when I started to realize that, I was like, wow, I don't get sick anymore. I don't have any issues. I don't have a health issue. I don't have weight gain. I don't have, bloating. I don't have tonsillitis. I don't have, coughing or like my ears. I used to always have things with my ears. Same thing, all gone. And I started to realize, wow, well, then I guess I'm not contributing to the system that's trying to keep me in this perpetual cycle to make money off of me.
Not a repeat customer anymore.
No. And that's the thing is it's this revolving door. They're just trying to keep you coming back to pay more money. And it's funny because I've been censored so many times for talking about all these different topics just because it go against that money train, right? It's a money train just that keeps making money, and everything competes with everything, and the more we start to dig into these things, the more we start to see that a lot of what we've been told is a lie. And then there's a lot of suppressed information. And our whole goal was to just pretty much bring forward ancient information and get rid of all the fear so that we could heal our bodies. Because in my opinion, when somebody is healthy and they're in their their true elevated health, they're unstoppable, right? Because there's no way somebody can conquer you when you are healthy. It's only when you've been weakened, you became feeble, whatever, then they can take advantage of you because you're not in the right state. And same with 2020 and 2021 was it a mind experiment, mind control to put people into a scared state of fear so that they could be manipulated, right? Mm-hmm. People would do things against their own will because they're not thinking logically because they're in fear. So same thing when our health has been diminished, it's the same thing that they use with the fear tactics. And they do these back and forth, and there are solutions to all of this. And that's why I've been trying to put out as many as I can so that we can have different things to bring our body back so we could be at our highest state of health. Because like I said, then nobody's going to conquer me. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Nobody's going to tell anybody what to do because we have the knowledge to see through the lies and then understand our body. And once we understand that and realize that like germs are not doing anything and all this nonsense, then all of a sudden you take back all your power, right? Because that's the power that you possess. And they want us feeble, weak, and frail so that they can make us think that we are just like this little thing. And then we have to be dependent on these systems, but we don't. Because these systems we have today, like the medical system is new. Like 1913 Flexner Report, Rockefeller's taken over. It's new. The old school ways was natural healing, and that was the original way. We have new ways which are actually more toxic, more poisonous, more painful than ever than these old ancient ways of healing. So that's my whole, pretty much on it. Why it started, why it began, where it all came from, and how, just really trying to put it out there.
Beautiful. And thank you so much for all this information. And I think you touching on, people really need to understand the history, touching on how the medical system is only 100 years old. I mean, if you really go back and learn about how it started with Rockefeller and how he took over and what it was before that, and the germ theory versus the terrain theory and Louis Pasteur. I mean, even Louis Pasteur, I did a show a couple months ago about it, and even Louis Pasteur admitted on his deathbed that the terrain theory was right.
Yes.
And we're still going by the germ theory.
Yes. And he pasteurized everything. And that's a big one. That's one that everybody should know about when it comes down to anything. Pasteurization. Pasteurization is poison. That's the easiest way of saying it. Because when you pasteurize something, you are microwave radiating it with a technology that we don't even know, right? We don't even know what actual pasteurization is, what they're doing nowadays, because they won't disclose it. It's a proprietary blend that will not disclose what their actual process is. They'll tell you it's heated to, 200 degrees, but they don't explain the process. The process is actually a proprietary blend. So that's a big telling thing. And if someone's suffering from any type of allergic reactions or any type of, every time they eat dairy, they, don't feel well, that's because it's pasteurized. When you're eating raw, unpasteurized products, they're not tainting and changing the molecular structure of it so that you become sick. Right. And that's why, there was this whole bait and switch, in my opinion, with the dairy industry, where all the people became lactose intolerant. It's because this is poison now. It's been pasteurized, and the molecular structure has changed. You can't absorb it. The enzymes have been broken down and the nutrients have been depleted. So when you go to eat it, all you get is an adverse reaction. That's pretty much it.
Your body can't process it. It's foreign.
Yeah, it's completely foreign. And that's what Louis Pasteur was big on. He pasteurized milk. This was back in the 1900s. Because cows at the time were so overcrowded in these little cities, or these big cities, I should say, and they were eating like cardboard and all these toxins. So they said, if we pasteurize it, we could still sell it. We could still sell the poison. And even though it's blue, we can change it to make it white so that we can still sell it and still make money. And that's where the whole pasteurization process came from, was that they wanted to sell this city milk. And that's why I call it, it's just city milk. It's not out in the, in the farms and in the beautiful area where the cows are roaming. No, these cows were crammed into little cells, and then they were producing blue milk. So they had to come up with a solution, and that was pasteurization. So they zapped it and basically microwaved it, and then changed the color of it, and realized they could resell it and people could consume it. Some people would get sick, not all, but some would get sick, so they could still turn a profit, and then they could keep that perpetually going till today. Right. And that's where when you go to the grocery store, especially outside of Arizona, because Arizona has raw milk, thankfully, in their grocery stores. But if you go to the grocery store outside of Arizona, it's all pasteurized. Right. It says organic and it's whatever. And then you'll turn it around. It'll say Trader Joe's, it's pasteurized. That pasteurization process leads to your basically tonsillitis, ear problems, sinuses, swelling, whatever it may be. Because, I was going to say, because the body cannot recognize the enzymes and it cannot recognize it as food. And then the body starts to give you signs and say, why are you putting this in my body? I need to get it out, right? I need to get these things out of me. But you keep giving yourself all this pasteurized products, and then you lead to all these health issues. And it's crazy because Louis Pasteur was just, in my opinion, a scummy person. But that's the thing. All of these people do the dirty work for these people, X, Y, and Z. And they give them, for example, like a Nobel Prize, so that it makes it look like they are the savior to everything.
They're the expert.
Reality, yes, and the expert. But in reality, they're poisoning the people. And it's crazy because if you go on Google and you type in about raw milk, it'll talk about how it's deadly, right? But raw milk hasn't done anything to anybody. If anything, the medical system, which kills 783,000 people a year, that's pretty deadly, right? That's, in my opinion, if we're going to pick between the two. So it's like
third leading cause of death.
Yes, exactly. Third leading cause. So like you look at this and you go, why would I consume this food that's been microwaved and zapped and becomes nutrientless? And then we move into the starting point of, like we were talking about the company, we're nutrient deficient, right? Because their foods that we're getting are not the original food or in its original source or grown in its original soil. And then you develop all these plethora of health issues because the fact that your body is just crying out for nutrients and it just needs to be balanced. And that's what we have to focus on, rebalancing and remineralizing our body. Because it's funny, because when you look at especially raw milk,
it's Scottsdale.
There's always a sports car, motorcycle, whatever it may be. It drives me nuts. But whatchamacallit, so if you look at raw milk, it's in its perfect colloidal state, right? It absorbs perfectly into the body. And it's funny because if you look at colloidal supplements like colloidal silver, colloidal gold, and all these things, they always attack them the most. Mm-hmm. So if you think about too, they always attack raw milk as well too, because it's in the colloidal state, which allows it to absorb into the body at its easiest way, basically. So it's fascinating because it's nature's perfect superfood. And Louis Pasteur was like, we got to get rid of that, right? Because we need to create other markets. We need to create other things so that we can take our genetically modified foods and all these other things and place those into that, and it's just, it's crazy when you look at it, because they created industries from industries that would never have existed, right? That's how it always goes. I always say it's like the adapter to the adapter to the adapter to the adapter. And you don't know what the original was because you've got all these goofy adapters in between.
Right. And what I find is fascinating, that whole Louis Pasteur and the whole, germ theory, terrain theory, him kind of taking over the narrative and being the expert. And that went hand in hand with Rockefeller taking over and creating big pharmaceuticals. And that pretty much happened around the same time. So it was kind of this like, okay, Louis Pasteur is making everybody sicker while Rockefeller's profiting with his pharmaceuticals to, quote unquote, make them better.
Well, and that's that whole 1913 Flexner report, right? Everybody should be aware of that. That's when the Rockefellers and the Carnegies took over the medical system. So the system they see today when they go into talk to the professionals is a system that has been hijacked back in 1913. And when they got rid of basically anybody who practiced natural medicine and replaced them with anybody who does surgery, radiation, or chemicals, they basically did a flip. So anybody who practiced natural medicine or was about the holistic way, all of them, all of those schools no longer receive funding, right? So they pretty much went out of business within the next 20 years, because if your school was not practicing what they said and went by what they said, you weren't getting a dollar. So all these people pretty much completely went out of business. They destroyed the natural ways of healing because they didn't have any money anymore. And then they made the MD certification so expensive that only certain families who were wealthy enough could afford that certification. So that also eliminated all the natural people as well, because they couldn't afford to pay for this expensive certification. So that weeded out a whole bunch. And then any person who practiced holistic or healing medicine or whatever it may be was deemed a quack, right? That's where that whole term came from. They called them a quack because they wanted to make sure that any person who was doing something outside of the box, right? Like, let's say creating an ultraviolet lamp, which actually used to be sold all the time in America, but that was considered quack medicine because it was not going with the new hijacked route, basically.
Right.
So any person, Wilhelm Reich, Victor Schauberg, I mean, I could name them all, but any person who did it the healing way, the natural way, was all deemed as crazy. And then they would basically try to turn the public against them. And then they would make up a story about them. That's usually also how it goes. They'd make up some story or narrative to make it really seem like they're completely nuts, so that they could basically outcast them with the media to try to get them out of the radar, so that they could have these other people who are basically practicing all these really weird ritualistic ways of healing, we'll say. Mm-hmm. And those people would still get money, while these people who are trying to make a difference pretty much lost their funding or just went out of business or were put in jail because they were trying to actually fix the problem. And then their solutions were considered a threat to the profits over here on the right-hand side. So when you look at it, it's all this big switch, and people have to really be aware of that, because when they're going in to see their professional or the person they're talking to, they have to understand that that person's only had 5 hours of nutrition, right? In 10 years of education, 10
right.
years of education, 5 hours of nutrition, right? So if a person's going to help you, they're not understanding the underlying cause, which is just nutrition, right? Like everything you're doing is just or everything that you're suffering from is usually just a nutritional deficiency, or it could be something toxic in the home. You know, there could be some poisons in the home, but for the most part, it's just a nutritional deficiency. So if you can't target this underlying cause, because everyone I ever went to when I had my issues, nobody ever talked about food, right? They didn't ask me what I was eating. They didn't ask me, my lifestyle. They never asked any of that. They just continued to, I got something else and I'm getting paid for this one. I'm getting a big buck for this one. So this one will be good for you. And if it works, it works, I don't know. So, and that's where I started to have this big disconnection. I think I was like 18 or 19 or something, or maybe 20. But I was like, something's off here. You're not I told my mom at the time, I'm like, these people don't know anything. Like, I feel like I know myself better. And that's where we have to go back to that instinct as well.
Yes. We have to trust our own inner authority.
Yes, because we know what's best, right? My gut instinct tells me exactly what's best. We have to go back to that, because that's also been diminished, because we're giving away our power or consenting to a professional who supposedly knows us, but doesn't know my body. They're not in my body. They don't understand my aches, my pains, whatever it may be, my headaches, whatever it could be. So how are they going to tell me what's wrong? Like, they're not even, anything connected to it. So it's like, when you really look at it that way too, you look at a lot of stuff of how they used to do a lot of energy medicine and a lot of healing with energy and by touch and with dowsing rods and all these things. And that's because they could determine that there was an imbalance in this frequency or energy in the body. And that's how they used to heal people, based on an energetic imbalance. And that's what, when we go into the whole flu, as everybody's, it's the flu season. The influenza is the influence of energy that's impacting the body, and the people are having an electrical imbalance that's basically causing their flu-like symptoms, right? And that was all shown back in the 1880s, 1870s, when they started rolling out power lines, and all of a sudden everybody came down with the flu. And they couldn't understand why it was happening, because now there is an electrical imbalance that has occurred, which is cooking their heads, because you got power lines above the skull. And then people started having loss of smell, loss of taste. They started having nosebleeds. They started having all these things, or they started hearing voices, and they started locking them up, because they basically said, oh, you're crazy. You're hearing voices, whatever it may be. We're going to put you in a mental asylum, even though it was because of a new form of technology being rolled out that caused certain parts of, or certain portions of the population to have, for example, a side effect from something that's toxic, basically. That's kind of what it is.
Right. And that's what we really need to be mindful of is these new technologies, our Wi-Fi, our cell phones, our 4G, 5G now, how it's impacting us, what we can do about it. And when you were talking about how, this whole switch that happened in the early 1900s, I always think, about how they're suppressing information and they're calling doctors quacks. And I was like, that sounds really familiar.
Yeah, that's 2021 and 2022
I
all
feel
on.
like they're cookie cuttering and
Yes.
rolling out that strategy right now.
Yes. And that's the thing is when you look at this, and that's why I say everybody just look into the past and actually look into the
Yeah.
past because everything is repeat, right?
And
19,
who's our modern day Louis Pasteur?
it's it would be Mr. Gates and all the other people who are out there as well too. And that's the thing. There's always these people who are around, and they always do the same play. And when this was all beginning, I said, everybody, look at 1976. The 1976 swine flu, it's the exact same playbook as 2020 and 2021. You had an energy crisis, you had a meat crisis, you had, people, being, falsely given things to supposedly solve things. You had a bunch of government payouts, you had tons of lawsuits. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's the same playbook. Then you go back 1919 with the Kansas flu, right? That's where that flu originated from. The Spanish flu originated in Kansas. It was in a military base because of the rollout of the radio. That's what caused one person to get the flu. And guess what? Same techniques. We got to shut everything down. We got to, blah, blah, blah. It's jumping all over. But the underlying cause is not talking about the technology, which was actually rolling out all over these different places. And everywhere they would roll out this technology, they would then cause all this sickness. And then they would say it was the germ, but it was in reality the technology. And they would use the same playbook, right? You got to stay home. You can't go out past 8 o'clock because supposedly it's getting you at 8 o'clock or 8:01.
Right.
You got to cover up your face, all these goofy things. And it's like, I remember when it was all happening, I'm like, okay, so today, like I got to do something. I didn't have to do anything yesterday or the day before, or now I can't go out past 6. Was it come out after dinner? Just all these things that it's like, what are you're just making up stuff, or the distance. I looked up the information on the distance, and that's from 1886. So like you just pulled something from 1886 because you thought that sounds like a good plan. And the guy who created the 6 feet distance basically said 20 feet was like too much. He said 10 feet was like, and then he said 6 feet's probably good.
That's
so
very
it's like,
scientific.
Yeah, that's a good theory, right? So then you do all this stuff and you cast all this stuff onto the people with basically theories and whatever. And it's crazy because when you look at, like I was saying, if you go back into the past and you start looking at all these things, as I started pretty much going through this, I started seeing all these same playbooks, same thing, and it's like, there's always solutions that came out through all these things, but they try to hide all that because they need to keep the people, like I said, in the perpetual fear. And then also use the media, which has been completely taken over a long time ago with Operation Mockingbird and that whole spiel. But they have to use that into keeping you in a frenzy, when in reality, we just need to sit back, almost close our eyes, go into a deep meditation and think, if I look at this, whatever I'm facing in front of me right now from social media or whatever it may be, if I look at this from every angle, does this make sense? Right. And that's what they don't teach us in our educational.
Logic and reason is no longer, a thing. It's not taught. It's actually discouraged, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, and because of that, you basically are not thinking outside the box. And I remember when I was in school, I used to get in trouble all the time for talking too much and whatever else and doing whatever I pretty much felt like doing. But I also was just, a lot of times for me, I was just bored because I didn't feel like I'm like engaging. And now that I know that pretty much everything I learned is all not what it is, then it really, really makes me realize I wasted a lot of time. And it did show me the opposite, which I am, obviously thankful for, because if I didn't see it, maybe I wouldn't know. But at the same time, I think, how much are we dampening our society and our creativity and our kids? Think of the potential, if you taught kids the amount of stuff that they could learn for the first 18 years of their life, holy cow, it would just be, and then it would be a society that's unstoppable. Yeah. But if you put everybody through this ringer, this system, and you craft and create these people, then all of a sudden you're going to craft and create a society that you're trying to do. And that goes into also, Rockefellers took over educational system. When the Standard Oil broke up, they pretty much put their hands into everything because they couldn't have a society that goes against the grain. They needed a society that goes with it.
They
So
wanted worker bees for their factories and for their, big new companies that they were creating.
yeah, and even with like the Carnegies too, that's why they got involved as well. They needed to be like, okay, if we're thinking about logic here, we need to get rid of that, and then we need to bring in this stuff that just and that's what I realized. Education is ingraining something into your mind, right? You're not really learning something. You're not like, okay, I'm gonna take this thing, I'm gonna take it apart and figure it all out. Or this tree, how do the roots grow? How does it come about every summertime? Where does the sap come from? I don't know, all these different things,
Right.
or how come trees come back to life? Like nobody ever answered that question for me, but I figured it out. But regardless, it's like we're not thinking about these things in different ways. We're so used to, A, B, C, D,
Right.
and then, that's it. And it's like, well, maybe there's a different answer. And then anytime you compete against that, then they start to basically say, oh, no, no, no. And they got to draw you back in and pretty much try to tell you, in my opinion, that you're not going with the curriculum. And it's like, but who created it, right? Shouldn't we have these different things of creativity and inventions? Because if you think about like 1900s, there were so many inventions, 1910s, tons of inventions. Every technology that we have or every piece we have now, we created in the 1900s. So it's like, why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we inspiring kids to do those things and really push them to do more? It's like instead we're teaching them about something, and then each grade, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever it may be, they just keep pushing in the same nonsense to teach you the same thing again. When it's like, shouldn't we be going higher than this? Like my car's got 20 miles to the gallon. Shouldn't I have like 2,000 by now? It's 2022. Like, these are the questions that we have to ask because the educational system is putting us into a hypnotic state that's not allowing our brain to see its true potential.
Right. It's a dumbing down, follow the cookie cutter system. Don't think, don't question. It's like that's a tree. Well, what is a tree? What's the essence of a tree? We don't really talk about that. It's just, nope, that's a tree. That's the way it looks. And that's all you need to know.
And that's why I always thought if I started a schooling program back in the day, I think I was like a 22 or 23, something when I thought of that. I thought you should have a farm or a business. That's it. And like right as soon as you get out of school, when you hit 18, you find out what you like and you get into that. And it should be a trade, a hobby, a skill, or a farm or growing food, something. Because if you went through what you had to go through in the first 2 years, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know what I was getting into. And this is going to be maybe much more difficult than I thought. And you would see things differently. Or even just if you started up a business, you might see things completely different than, with how things go in real life, or taxes or all of this nonsense too. I mean, there's so many things. It's like, and we don't explore any of that. We just keep teaching that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, and he came over here with 3 ships that are not displayed in any museums.
Right.
So, it's interesting. So a guy supposedly found us, but we don't have any record or any information or any of his ships or any of his details, but we keep teaching it. And then we have a holiday to keep repeating that same nonsense, to keep putting it into our mind, to remind us of the nonsense that we learned while we were growing up. And it's just, when you start to question it, you go, why were there cities here before 1492? Why were there towns and castles here before 1492? Why did the Norse people, why were they here before 1492? Just all these questions that they forgot to answer when we were all sitting in class in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade.
Right. And I feel like right now is just such an eye-opening time where it's kind of, like you said, we're repeating that kind of cookie cutter cycle that they're trying to kind of gain more control and traction that they did in the beginning of the 1900s. And now we're blatantly seeing this next level of control and, mental influence, which, is opening a lot of people's eyes too, which is good. Now, another important factor in our health and wellness, as I mentioned at the top of the show, and I feel like it's not spoken about enough, is the health of our soil. So what is the current state of our soil and how is it in turn affecting our health?
So our soil has been heavily depleted, and this goes back into all the pesticide use and chemical use, big big farm, big farms. That's the best way to say it. When you have big farms that have thousands of acres and you're growing one crop, such as corn, canola, soy, wheat, whatever it may be, and you're dousing it with over 4 billion pounds of pesticides that are loaded with iron as well, too, which we'll talk about as well. But when they're loaded with iron, what starts to happen is you basically diminish the magnetism or life force of the soil, and you pretty much deplete it of all of its microbes and all of its nutrients and all of its life, all of the worms, all of the things that exist, and you start to yield food that pretty much has no nutrients. I mean, that's what I've started to realize. These conventional foods are sprayed so heavily with pesticides that the soil now starts to turn like a rock. And then you start to have, if water lands on it, it starts to create a flood, right? People are like, oh, we're having all these floods. It's like, yeah, because
absorbing.
Exactly. You've turned the soil into a rock because you've diminished everything and destroyed the life of it. And then now when the water lands on it, it just sits on top instead of going down into the earth like it used to do.
And that's one of the main points of our soil. Another one of the main functions of it is to hold on to the nutrients.
Yes, and that's the thing, is that the soil is there to provide nutrients. You see all these, I see it all the time now. They got like these like aerial farms. They're like farms that grow into the air with water and whatever else. That's patented by Monsanto, right? Mm-hmm. Monsanto wants us indoors. They want to own the bees. They have a patent with Walmart with the bees as well too. But they want to own the bees. They want to own the soil, and they want to own the nutrients, because what happens is when you get rid of the soil that has all these beautiful nutrients and micronutrients and everything else, is now you can now add nutrients back, and you could sell those nutrients to the person, right? So now when they grow in these vertical farms that are indoors under blue lighting, which is not natural to lights, that's why with a blue light plant, they got to put it outside because it starts to die. But anyways, so with these non-natural structures where it's growing up into the air, you're growing with water, and there's not really a lot of nutrients in water. There's hydrogen, there's oxygen, and whatever. And there are trace things, and I can talk about that later. But in general, there's really no nutrients in there. So what happens is now you got to add vitamin things and all kinds of other interesting things to try to balance everything out, because nature doesn't work that way. Everything works in harmony and balance. And what Monsanto is attempting to do is disrupt all of that so that they can have control. And then if we go into all the nonsense that gets put into the air, that can also disrupt the sun that comes down and balances out all the soil as well. So you have these combinations of things happening at the same time to basically get rid of the life force of the soil, and then basically leads you to food that does not have the nutrients or the density that it once had, which that's why, like, if you ate an apple in 1900s, you probably got like 2000% of your vitamin C, versus if you ate an apple in 2022, you probably got 1%. So when you're not getting those nutrients into the body starts to fall apart. That's why we see people premature aging faster than ever, right? You got people with health conditions at like the age of 10, they have a health condition. It doesn't even make any sense, but because their body is so nutrient deficient that it's starving for nutrients, and because the soil has changed so much, then you think you're eating, but you're not really eating those nutrition. You know what I mean?
Yeah, nutrition density. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, like a carrot, like you said, an apple then is not the same as an apple now, and that's a huge. I always have the thought, how they talk about this global warming stuff, and I'm like, I think we're all going to die of lack of nutrients from our soil before global warming. I mean, it's a huge issue, and we're not talking about it.
I was going to say, in relation to that, it's everything. If it's not warming, it's cooling. Yeah. If it's not cooling, it's warming. If it's not up, it's not down. Fear. Yeah, it's always, it's whatever fits the agenda. I mean, I just saw an article just 4 minutes ago before we even started this, that they said Switzerland is now going to ban electric vehicles because they are having too many power outages. So it's like, people are realizing, maybe this doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. And maybe what I was being told doesn't make a lot of sense either, because, where are you going to get all the energy and all this other stuff? And all of that too relates to, with the electrical vehicle movement, they go in and destroy Mother Earth. They literally wreck and dig and blow up and do all these crazy things to Mother Earth to get a little bit of lithium,
Yeah.
So it's
And how
like,
much lithium is in the earth? Is it going to run? When is it going to run out? Do we have an estimate on that? And how are electric vehicles powered? They're powered by fossil fuels.
you got it. And
So
that's, and when you follow that, then you start to see, like, I remember there were electric vehicles running out of charges and they had a little diesel engine thing, bringing it back to life. And it's like, wait a minute, isn't that the opposite of what it's supposed to be? And then if electricity impacts us and our health, would an electric vehicle really impact our health a lot more? These are things we really have to start questioning. And that's why I started looking and going, doesn't make a lot of sense. But as for the soil, that also relates to the soil as well, because when they're digging up all that nonsense, they're destroying the soil and polluting, right? We got pollution, all over the place. And it's like, that's a big contributing factor too. And same with Monsanto spraying 4 billion pounds of pesticides. If you go down into the Gulf of Mexico, right where the Mississippi is, right where it all goes in, that whole area is dead, right? It is completely dead. All the fish, the animals, everything is dead. Reason being is because if you're poisoning an area, it's just the same thing as if you're poisoning your body. Your body is slowly starting to break down, and that's what all these things are doing, is they're breaking us down at the cellular level so that our body just falls apart. And that's pretty much starts with the soil. So if we heal the soil, which there's multiple ways we can, but if we heal the soil, then we can start to bring back that life force into our body, into our eyes, into our brain, and rejuvenate ourselves to our highest potential.
right. And let's get into that, because this is really exciting. And this is something I haven't heard of until I heard it from you and talking about your Instagram page. And I love that, because you're just talking about so many amazing things that are really, really deeply hidden. So what is electroculture and how can it help improve the health of our soil?
So electroculture is basically harnessing the Earth's energy that's all around us 24/7, 365. So what you can do is you can get some wood and you can get some copper and you can wrap it right around and basically make a spiral or a vortex around that piece of wood. You can place that into the soil where the copper is going into the soil and the other piece of copper is going up into the air. And you can make an antenna. Usually you want to make them anywhere from 3 feet up to 6 feet. If you can do even higher than that, that's even better. But basically what you're doing is you're creating an atmospheric antenna to harness the energy of the earth so that you can boost your soil and your plants. So what's happening is with all these cell phone towers and all this nonsense frequencies that we're all around and whatever else, they're diminishing the life force of the soil, right? They're taking out that life. So it makes it harder for you to grow. It makes you more dependent on a grocery store, right? Because if it's harder for you to grow, you got to go to the grocery store because you can't get the food elsewise. So this starts to bring back your soil. You'll start to notice you'll have more bees, you'll have more birds, you'll have more little insects, good ones, the ones that come and basically are to balance everything out, like grasshoppers and things like that. And you won't have to use pesticides, you won't have to use fertilizers, and you won't have to use anything else. And that's what was discovered. So if we go back in time, you have 1920s Justin Christoflo. Justin Christoflo created all these atmospheric antennas using copper and zinc and brass to basically harness the Earth's energy so that he didn't have to use pesticides. What he noticed was at the time that his food would grow 2 to 3 times the size of what it normally is. Wow. So for example, I have a moringa pot that's on the balcony and it's in a pot. So like I tried it all out just to see what would happen. Moringa grows like wild in Arizona and California and all of the West Coast. And basically the pods are usually about 6 inches when they grow. These pods on my balcony were 14 inches and 22 inches. So I had basically 2 to 3 times the size. My cayenne pepper has, I think, 75 flowers on it. And it's just like in a pot as well, too. And I'm doing this, up in the air on a balcony, everything else. So basically, as I started to notice, when everybody started applying these electroculture techniques, their gardens started going crazy. Their food sprouted faster. Their garlic sprouted within 2 weeks, which usually takes 4 months. People are growing beets like the size of my head, pumpkins, 18-foot like tall vine pumpkins, just crazy things. So basically, Justin Christoflo was one of the founders of electroculture. There's a lot of others as well, too, because he learned from other people. But they basically learned if you take these atmospheric antennas and you place them in your soil, like if you look at like a church or a steeple or a mosque or a temple, it has the little antenna on top. That's harnessing all the earth's energy. So that's basically what the whole point of that was. And those on top of the temples or the mosques or the churches would have a wire that went down and went into the garden. That's why you always see these places, they have the best garden. It's like, wow, how'd you do that? They understood electroculture and they understood the atmospheric energy, and they would tie that down into their gardens so that their gardens were crazy. And then they'd have an abundance of food because then people would depend on them. It's all about this dependence, right? Getting rid of this dependence on things.
Owning the water, owning the soil, owning this. Next thing you know, they'll have a patent on the sun.
That's what yeah. Now they're trying to make a fake one, which they're just stupid after a while. That's what I realized. It's like, just let nature be its beautiful thing. It's glorious for what it is.
Belongs to everybody. So for anybody listening that wants to utilize this, it's just copper is okay. Just copper is okay. Cause I know you mentioned the 3, and also, does this change the nutrient value of the soil, or is it just harnessing kind of the energy of the earth?
So what you're doing is you're bringing back the electrical charge, right? Okay. So we'll make it, we'll say it that way. So we are electrical beings, and these plants are also, our beautiful plants here are also electrical beings. Right. They have sap, right? The sap is their blood, just like we have our blood. And what happens is when you put this copper or brass antennas near them, and we have a bunch of videos on our website so people can see it as well too. But when you put these next to by your plants, now what you're doing is you're enhancing the sap that is always flowing through the plant so that the plant can get more nutrients and live a healthier life. And it can also then dig its roots deeper and start to restructure the soil, because the whole reason the soil is nutrientless is because the plants are not doing the job anymore either too, because as they're being impacted, they're not spreading all the nutrients and moving things through, and then the microbes and the worms, all of that is being impacted. So copper or brass works really well in this category. And it's interesting because if we take it to another step of 1940s, you have Victor Schauberger. Victor Schauberger realized that people were using iron tools in their soil, and they started to develop drought-like conditions. They had to work harder, and they yield less food. But when he went to, I believe it was southern Turkey, so he went to northern Turkey and they were using iron tools. He went to southern Turkey and they were using wood, which is not impacting the magnetism of the soil, basically. When he started to notice when they used wood that their plants went like crazy and that they didn't have drought-like conditions and all these problems that they were also facing. So he noticed if you use copper, which that's where it all came from, copper and bronze and brass and all of these things, that things pretty much went crazy. So he created a plow. It was called the bio plow. And that plow was basically made out of copper and brass. And basically it would spin through the earth perfectly. So you didn't have to work that hard, because what he noticed was everybody who uses iron tools had diminishing yields. And it's interesting because when you go to Home Depot and Lowe's, what do they sell you? Iron tools. And the reason being is because...
Let me guess, Rockefeller owned the iron.
It could be. Honestly, at this point, I mean, I feel like everything is. But, you know, the thing is like when you look at it, it's interesting because when you... Okay, so if I have copper on this side and I have iron on this side, if I put copper in the soil, this is an electrical conductor. And it also, it harnesses the magnetism that's around you all the time, right? It can help enhance things. Iron, though, on the other hand, is not a good conductor, and it blocks the magnetism. So it's actually blocking the magnetism of the earth. So when they're spraying all these pesticides that are loaded with iron, then they go on with their iron tools and they just like destroy the land and whatever else. You are basically just ripping the life force out of the soil. And that's why Victor Schauberger was saying, you know, the whole Dust Bowl, like of part of it, was created because you guys are just using iron and just wrecking the soil the whole time. And then if you were just using copper, you would have an abundance. So he promoted copper tools to the government, I believe, of Bulgaria. And he said, listen, I'm going to make you these copper tools. Your farmers are going to have so much food. It's going to be in abundance. I've been researching this. My potatoes are massive. Everything is massive. You guys can have so much food. They basically shot it down because they did not want to go with his idea, because they were getting a kickback from the fertilizer companies and the pesticide companies at that time. So they put out this whole entire thing, and it was a whole broadcast with the newspaper and the television at that time, to basically say if you use copper tools on your food, you're going to yield too much food, and you're not going to make as much money.
Huh.
So they did this whole thing, and it was crazy because it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to have too much food and I'm not going to make enough money. How does that make any sense?
Right.
But the farmers at that time believed the media and the television at that time, and basically Victor Schauberger's work went under. And it was crazy because Victor Schauberger also created the first flying saucer. He created free energy. He understood water. He understood vortexes. He understood everything because he just said, just go out and sit in nature and you'll understand it all because nature shows you everything.
Right.
And we, on the other hand, or I should not say we, the Rockefellers and these people are going against nature in inverting everything. That's
Yes.
why they load their pesticides with iron because they know that it will diminish the soil so that they can keep selling you more of it because they already know you're not going to yield that much. So you're going to have to keep coming back for more drugs and more spray so that you can yield more.
Right.
When in reality, if we were using electroculture and understanding everything is frequency and harmony and balance, then we could have as much food as we want. And taking it a step further, you have DDT, 1950s. DDT is good for me. 1950s DDT was an attack on the birds and the bees and the insects and the humans as well too, but primarily the birds and the insects because both of those, so birds actually emit a frequency to tell plants to open up their leaves called the stomata. It's this part of their cell so that they can absorb the nutrients. So like anytime you hear that rooster, it comes up at 4 a.m, that rooster sends out a signal to all the plants to open up and absorb all the rays and all the nutrients. So that DDT was attacking all those birds who are also chirping. You know, when we hear birds chirping, it's very magical, it's very healing, but it's also very healing for the plant because it accelerates plant growth as well too.
Oh,
So that was an attack on there. So there was a guy who created a boombox, which basically was doing bird frequencies, and he would put it in front of his plants, and he would spray a little bit of wine on them. It was called Dan Carlson's boombox, and he would use this to basically make his plants grow like crazy. So that was the one part, and the other part of DDT is it harmed the insects, which are also pollinators. When you start doing electroculture, all your pollinators start coming back. I got bees all over. I got bees who sit on me. I got bees everywhere. And whatever, you start to see all these insects come back because they also pick up on the resonance and the frequency that's all around us. We just don't see it because we can't see infrared and ultraviolet, while insects can determine those things and actually pick up on it. Also related to birds as well too is they have crystals in their skull, and those crystals are basically like magnetite, which is like a magnet, so that they can pick up on where to go. And when we got all these frequencies beaming, they don't know where to go, so they get confused, and then they don't know where to have their babies because they're so used to doing certain things. So electroculture, when you start healing your backyard or your land, whatever wherever you may be, when you start healing that, you'll start to notice all these birds and bees and everything start coming back because they know that it's a healing, safe place for them because these frequencies are not impacting that area in the same way.
right. So you're increasing the magnetism in that specific area and healing the soil in that way. And are there other factors or any ways that we can help heal our terrain and actually help heal or, the nutritional value that we're losing and the nutrients, et cetera?
So there's ways you can use basalt, which is like volcanic clay. And volcanic clay has a whole bunch of different minerals in it, and it's very healing. That's why if we, for example, let's say we went to Hawaii or Alaska, there's tons of volcanoes over there, and everything is absolutely massive because everything is getting all the volcanic clay, which is loaded with nutrients. That's the whole point of the volcano. Like the volcanoes, I think, is going off right now in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And it's basically just it resets it, but also it burns and cooks and then nourishes the soil. So you could use basalt in your plants or in your dirt to actually remineralize. And then also basalt is loaded with quartz. Quartz works as a piezoelectric, basically frequency to increase the energy, right? They use quartz in computers, watches, telephones, everything you can think of has quartz in it. So you can use this too in your soil to help increase that. And there was a lot of people who even studied taking just quartz by itself and placing it into their soil, and their soil and plants went nuts as well too, because you're just bringing energy to that area which has become lifeless. And that's all it is. It's about just replenishing, and nature will do its thing because that's how it always works. It's always done this for thousands of years. Like if there's a fire, it burns down and it replenishes. and those ashes and those nutrients and go back into the soil. And people used to do that too. They would get ashes, or they would cook down some trees that were maybe falling over. They would sprinkle that all over the soil so that all those micro and those little nutrients could go right back into the soil. So you can use basalt, you can use ashes, you can use quartz. Those would, I would say, be the best. Or you can use azomite. That's another one as well too. And these are all just either clays or different types of natural ways to do it, because you don't need to put synthetic things, because when you put synthetic things on here and try to spray it and whatever, you're creating these imbalances, and the plant's like, what are you doing to me? And then they know, because it was interesting. This one book I was reading, that plants can read your thoughts, right? Like they know when you're coming around, they know if you're aggressive to them, they know if you're angry, they can read your brain. They can read it from almost 10,000 miles away. They were saying in this one book, this guy was going through some things and his plant started cowering. Like the plants knew that his health was being impacted. So we're much more connected. And Marcel Vogel was one who was really big in that work and showed everything about plants and crystals and quartz, right? Because quartz has water in it and can help assist plants as well. So there's so many different things and just ways to heal. And it's like, we can have an abundance. When they tell you that there's a food shortage, they're just making stuff up so they can put you into fear. I mean, the food shortages of 2022 was Amazon, Costco, Walmart, and a few others holding stuff in an inventory or holding stuff in a warehouse so that in the summertime they could have an inventory sale, because nobody was buying up their stuff anymore. So they had to hoard it all. And then they had to resell it at a discount, because they were just pretending like they were running out of food the whole time, just to put us in a fear tactic. Like, oh, the flour's running out. No, it's still there. And that's the thing. It's like, so if we have an abundance now, which we already do, now imagine the true abundance that we could have of every garden, every person, every family, and people can grow even just one thing. They could have a pot in their house and put a little copper rod in there with some wood, and their plant will go crazy in their house, because it doesn't matter where it is. It's all I've realized is there's so much potential. And that's the thing, is I really despise fear, because it's all just playing on the same emotion. And we really could have so much, and we could really live in such a beautiful world. And that's all I want to be in, and I don't want any other nonsense. And it's like, with this simple technique, and it costs you $2, you could have your plants going crazy. And also too, the more love and empathy you put into your garden, the more plants will respond to, right? Because they can pick up on all your emotions and see if you really don't care. Like, you go out there and just pour some water on them, well, then that's the same thing. It's like you're not connected. They can sense that as well. And that goes into our conscious minds of shamanism and druidism and all the ancient times and our ancient predecessors who were very connected with the land, energy workers, energy healers. Like, everybody was connected. You could just look at a plant, tell you when it's going to be the full moon. Like, it's wild. We need to connect back to that and really go out in nature and be a part of it, and hug trees, touch trees, whatever, and also touch our soil, because when we go out there with rubber shoes on, we're not touching the soil. We're disconnected, and all of these things are different ways in which we've been disconnected. And as we raise, in my opinion, the vibration of the soil and the vibration of our plants and the vibration of our health, we can then help other people do the same thing as well.
Absolutely. We definitely need to start shifting into being better stewards of our beautiful Mother Earth. And all this information is incredible you're sharing. It's just, wow. Now, speaking of narratives, we're seeing on mainstream media right now a lot of talk about water shortages as well. First it was food shortages, now it's water shortages, and some are saying it's an emergency. Some articles are stating that in the US, some places are running out of water. So what's your take on this? And I know you talk about something called primary water versus secondary water. Can you kind of get into that as well?
Of course. So primary water is hydrogen and oxygen being pressurized and pushed up from inside the earth to create unlimited water, right? So first and foremost, we're never running out of water. There's always water being created every single day. It's all around us. You could find it in the spring. You could find it by a volcano. You could find it near a waterfall. You could find it anywhere you go. You could dig deep enough and there'll be water coming out. Back in the day when they used to dig all those mines, especially in Arizona and Tombstone and Bisbee and all that stuff, they had to close a lot of those mines because water started pouring out of the walls. They were basically go down there and all of a sudden they're flooding and they don't know what to do. And their pumps were not even strong enough to get rid of the water. So they just basically shut down the mine because there was so much water coming out of the walls. And this is not even going that deep. The farther you go, the more water there is. And it's fascinating because we've been sold this lie of we're running out of water so that they can put us into a control mindset. And that started with Lake Mead, right? Lake Mead was this big when they were doing huge things. The water's getting low. Well, first and foremost, to distinguish between the two. So we have primary water, which is water that comes up from inside the earth and is always being created. Then we have our secondary water, which is this rainwater cycle, which is always being manipulated, right? So we have this cycle and we have this cycle. This one is unlimited and infinite. And then this one is just always being messed with, and who knows what even this water is. It's filled with heavy metals and whatever else. So we have these two. So what they're trying to do is they're giving us the illusion that we're running out of water by showing us that certain man-made holding tanks like Lake Mead and other lakes, because there's 53,000 different holding tanks that have been created in America of water, and those are starting to get low, and also because they've been disconnected from primary water, so of course they're going to get low. It's inevitable. But those are getting low, so they try to do this whole, we're running out of water, now you need to stop gardening. Oh, there you go. Take away your ability to grow food. And then also stop, washing your car, stop doing this, stop taking a shower, stop doing that, stop cooking. You're doing all of this so that we can usher in forms of taxes to control and manipulate you at the water level. Right. Now, it's interesting too, because when you look at the secondary water cycle over here too, it's not alive. It's not structured. It's not beautiful. It doesn't have a snowflake being like in the molecular structure. It's dead. It looks like applesauce. So when we place it onto our skin, it also does the same effect. It causes aging. It destroys the body. Same with tap water. It's loaded with fluoride. It's loaded with pesticides, arsenic, lead, and all these things. So that's this water cycle, which is very goofy, and I don't even know why we use it, but also that's how it always goes. And then you have this primary water, which is structured. When a person sits in primary water, they will instantly come back to life, because there's so much oxygen and hydrogen to hydrate the body that their body will instantaneously start to recover. That's why if you go out in nature and you find these springs, like for example, you go northern Arizona, you go up by Sedona, there's a ton of springs up there. There's springs, they're all over the place. But if you go up there, there's a ton. You go up there and you sit in these springs, you will feel like a whole different person within about 30 minutes because the oxygen and hydrogen will absorb into your skin, and your body will start to restructure and you'll be fully charged. So they try to keep us away from this primary water specifically because of the healing potentials that it has, and also to create that scarcity mindset so they can usher in all this, we're running out of water and blah, blah, blah. And it's crazy because, simple story, and this is the easiest one to just debunk it all in just a short, like 2 minutes. Lake Elsinore, right? California. They have a dam and a lake that's over there. Lake Elsinore started to go dry in the 1950s, okay? And the people who were living in Lake Elsinore were like, oh my gosh, we're running out of water. What are we going to do? So they decided that the state of California decided they will drill some pipelines and pipe the water from somewhere else so they could put it in there and whatever else. Well, they ended up doing that, and guess what? They ran out of water. So they had to call up a dowser who basically came out with dowsing rods. And this is how you can find primary water very easily. You get yourself some dowsing rods, which are basically made out of copper or brass, and you can find water pretty much wherever you want to go. But anyways, he came out. He goes, there's water right here. You're going to drill about 75 feet. The dowsing rods just crossed, and you're going to drill here. The people who were in the system at that time, the government system, were like, this guy's a witch. He's a weirdo. He's whatever, because that's how it always is. Right. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So they decided to do 2 more pipelines, which both failed. And then the lake pretty much went dry. Right. So after a couple of years,
somebody made a whole lot of money off of.
You got it. Yes, you're doing something that doesn't even need to be done. So you're giving people money that actually doesn't even need to be spent. So they call back in the dowser, and he comes in with his rods again. He finds the water again. He goes, it's right here underneath the lake. Like, you got this lake, just drill right here. You'll have the water. Within, I think it was 2 months of time after they drilled the well, put it all together, everything else, Lake Elsinore was refilled and filled with water. And that's it. And there you go. The water has came back, and he found it. Now, also on top of it, that what they don't talk about is General Electric and all of the medical companies also hire dowsers to get unlimited water for all the little pills that they create and the electric companies and electric construction that they use. So it's interesting, if we are running out of water, why would two of the largest powerful entities, right, electric and the medical system, use free water, right? Wouldn't they be running out of water as well? They hire dowsers to come in and find them water wells so that they could have unlimited water. And a buddy of mine who also drills primary water wells has actually gone to a lot of different celebrities' houses and drilled them primary water wells because they have unlimited water as well. So the question is there's people over here who have an abundance of water, but then they put the fear out on the media to scare you into thinking we're running out completely, so that they can usher in down here taxes and have water police. Like Vegas had water police. They're like, you're using too much. It's like, you all know there's an abundance on this side, but you're doing a bait and switch. And there's a great book called New Water for the Thirsty World, and anybody can look that up. They can also go to the Primary Water Institute and look that up as well too, .org, and just do your research, because when you start to realize this fear set, and there's always the water's going out. If the water was running out, wouldn't like Pepsi or Nestle or Coca-Cola, who are also using all that water, wouldn't their profits be going down? Wouldn't they be concerned about the water? That's also because they pump primary water as well too. So they're not worried. They know that they can make a lot of money, and that if we're disconnected from that, they could take advantage of that. And the other thing with the primary water as well is it's just its structure, right? It's naturally structured. When we bring structured water into our body, we start to heal all the structure that's been broken down over time, right? With all these foods and all these chemicals and all this stuff, it's breaking down the beautiful crystal cellular structure that we have. So when we start bringing in this structured water, we start to heal like that. And that competes against the big systems we talked about in the beginning, because they're always making a lot of money. Now, if you go to Bosnia, they have the Bosnian pyramids. They have water in there that's completely structured, and it's very healing. They give people that water when they go into the tunnels so that they can heal faster, because they started to notice as soon as somebody drank it, their blood and everything started to stabilize within, I think it's like 30 minutes. Wow. Because once a person consumes structured water, the body starts to heal instantaneously. And then that eliminates this whole nonsense system we have over here of chemicals and whatever else, when we could just heal for free. Right? It's free, and the water is everywhere, and it's like even Hawaii, right? How do they have water? They're out on the ocean, and they have water coming out of the islands. They just dig into the wells and all of the stuff below. And there was, even on top of this, I had a USA Today news reporter reach out to me, and I thought this was interesting. They reached out to me and said, I see your videos on the water. What are your sources? I sent them their own articles from 2013, 2014, and 2015, showing that there's oceans underneath the ocean and that there's abundance of water and whatever. And they responded to me, no comment. And I thought, that's funny. So you can put these little tags and say that I'm saying false and misleading information and that this is all nonsense and whatever. But when I present you with the actual facts or the truth, then you just choose not to publish them. So it's interesting, because I started looking at things from all angles and going, if you put people into fear of water running out, you could do a lot. Also, if we take it one step further with like this whole Mississippi thing and the water being low over there, a lot of stuff is starting to resurface, right? In the Mississippi and Lake Mead. So you got both of those. A lot of towns that are underneath that water are starting to appear as well too, which now starts to make you wonder, well, why are there towns underneath the lakes? Were there towns there before and now we don't know? How did they get there? And also, too, why would you put a lake on top of a town unless you're trying to cover it up and hide it? That's the only thing I can see, because why on earth would you put a massive body of water on top of something? And I think what will start to happen, too, is a lot of things will come uncovered and people start going, it doesn't make any sense that all these man-made lakes have towns underneath them, or pyramids, or different types of sacred structures that are just not talked about. Like, for example, in South Carolina, they have a military base basically with like the fencing around this one lake, because there's a town down below there and they don't allow you to go into it. So it's like, well, what's down there that you don't want to show somebody? Could there be buildings? And my whole thing is just ask questions, right? That's it. Like, just ask questions, because I really realize I could tell you all this stuff too. You don't have to believe any of it. That's fine. But I'm just saying, ask questions, because what we've been told doesn't make a lot of sense. And when I started asking questions, I started realizing none of these things add up, and if we were running out of water, like, wouldn't these companies go under? Just a lot of things.
Right.
Or, for example, like my buddy said, if the glaciers are melting, wouldn't we have an abundance of water? Right? Like, that story was a couple of years ago, but now that story is not happening anymore. So they melted, but we didn't get any more water. We're running out. But then we got water in other places, but not water here. So it really starts to connect the dots of how, in my opinion, and I know deep down in my heart, we're never running out of water.
Right. And it's this power move. It sounds like we need to be vigilant and aware, and there needs to be enough people that are looking into this and questioning this, because next thing you know, like you were saying, they're going to own the water, they're going to own the soil, and that's another level of major control. And that's pretty terrifying. Now, what would the average person, where would we find structured water, drinking water, or water to, like you said, bathe in? And also, why is the type of water we consume so important, and how is kind of our tap water and most water we buy in stores impacting our health?
So the biggest thing with our water situation is that they're basically decimating the molecular structure of the water. Water is a living thing. It carries messages. It has memory. I mean, it's conscious. It does anything that it feels like doing. It has also free energy inside of it. That's why they built dams, to block up all the free energy that we could be using and things like that. So, water is a very magical substance. And with it, what happens is they destroy the hydrogen bond, so that the water is no longer hydrating the body. And then people are in a constant state of dehydration, right? Mm-hmm. They're always thirsty. And guess what you sell them? Electrolyte things, the little powders, and you pour it in. It's just salt.
Like chemicals.
You got it. Chemical salt. That's basically what it is, with the flavoring, which is also a chemical as well, too. So, you sell them that, and then that's sort of doing something, but not really. So the biggest thing is the water gets impacted, and then the structure falls apart, and then you start to become dehydrated. And as you become dehydrated, you also start to develop skin issues, maybe, rashes, eczema, all of these things as well, too, maybe wrinkles, whatever, all those things, because it's pulling the hydration out of the body. So when we're having these toxic waters on us, it's just impacting every cellular part of our body. But when it comes to how there are different solutions, so first and foremost, there's a couple different ways. It just depends on where you live. Some people have a well. And for people who already have a well, you can find out if it's primary water. There's people you can call, and they can come out and basically see if it's going, into a water vein, so that it's unlimited water, so that your well does not run dry. Those are those people. As for the next people, we'd say people living in like a city or something, or even at a house. What they can do is they can get a reverse osmosis filter with a fluoride filter, so that they can at least filter out all the chemicals, and especially the fluoride that's in the water. That would be one option. The other option is they could get a distiller, and they have distillers, which you can put into your house, and you can have distilled water in your home, so that you can drink pure water, which it's interesting because distilled water is for electrical devices, and we are electrical beings. So it makes sense that these two kind of go hand in hand. And it's interesting because when you look at all those pills I was telling you about, those use deionized water, which is water without an electrical charge, which is actually toxic to us. So they're basically inverting. They get the primary water for free, and then they invert it and take the electric out of it so that it's toxic. So with that, so you have distilled water or a distiller. You could also go to the store if you need to. And I try to give every option possible. You could go to the store, you could get distilled water, and you could drink it by the gallon as well, too. That's another option. You can also put a pinch of salt in there if you feel like you're missing minerals or whatever it may be. And then when it comes to structuring water as a whole, you can structure it in many different ways. You can structure it with your thought. You can structure it with intention. Like if you put your hands wrapped around it. There was a great documentary called Becoming Supernatural, where this lady showed how she was basically changing the pH of water just with her hands and her thought. So you can do a lot with just your thought itself. You can also structure water with wood, copper, quartz. Those would probably be the three best, I would say. And what you would do is you'd pour the glass of water like this into the cup, and you would spiral a vortex clockwise 7 times, and then you would do counterclockwise 7 times. It doesn't have to be 7. I'm just giving that as an example. You can do it 50 times. You can do it whatever. But back in the day, when farmers used to make their brews before they would place onto their soil, they used to sing to their brew, right? They would make the brew for the soil, and they would sing for like an hour, but they would stir clockwise, and then they would stir counterclockwise for like an hour.
And you do that with copper, you said?
You can do that with copper, like a copper spoon or a silver spoon or a wood spoon, or even a quartz crystal, right? If you want to do it with quartz crystal, if you have a large enough one, you could do that as well too. But those would be the 4 ways. And it's just a very simple, easy way to just structure water, and also place an intention, obviously, before you take a drink as well too. That's another one, because if you have bad intentions and you go to drink water, the water picks up on the intention as well too. So, it's very fascinating, because like I said, with the plants and the water both are aware of everything, just like we are, so we have to be consciously aware. But as you start to restructure that water, you'll start to notice you'll have better energy, you'll sleep better, you'll function better. And at this current moment, I'm actually working on a water shower filter that will structure water too, and basically be able to structure it as it comes out the shower too. There are filters out there that can help remove toxins and chemicals, but I want to do something that helps structure it as well. So that's what I'm doing as well. But the thing is as we use this beautiful structured water, we start to heal faster, and that's what your people will start to notice. Their energy will be better. They'll feel better. They'll sleep better. Their skin will be better. And even just filtering out chlorine and fluoride, those 2 alone, they'll feel better, right? Because the issue is you're getting through the tap water, you're just getting this recycled dead water that's been recycled like 800 times through who knows what. And that has an imprint on it, and that's going onto your body. Mm-hmm. So here in Arizona, for example, they have the canal, and everything is built in straight lines, which water does not move in straight lines. Nothing moves in straight lines. And then the sun is also beaming down on the water. So it's destroying the life force, because it's in such an extended period of time. So if you're placing that water onto your body, you're also diminishing the life force of your body and your brain and everything else. So when we start to look at this, it's like we were saying, these people who are doing these inverted techniques are just inverting everything of how things naturally work, so that they could then yield a profit and then sell you something else down the line. But the cool thing is once you start structuring things and you start understanding all of the intention of your mind as well, you can do stuff on your own. You take back your power to heal, and then also heal your family, your kids, and everybody else who's around you as well too.
Absolutely. Yes. Knowledge is power. And this is incredible knowledge that you're sharing. And I myself have always been a bit of a water snob. I call myself lovingly, because some people think it's odd. I have like the filters on my shower, and I'm really excited about your filter coming out, because I definitely want to check that out and try that out. And there are definitely levels to that whole rabbit hole. Once you start educating yourself on it. And I think it's interesting you're talking about distilled, because I started out on Kangen water, and I did Kangen water for many, many years, and I loved it. And then at one point I decided to get a distiller, and distilling actually works kind of the same way the natural cycle of water. It, heats it up, and then it turns into condensation, and that comes back down, kind of like the rain, kind of like the whole rain cycle. But yeah, I do the distiller, plus I add back in the minerals with Himalayan salt. Yep. So it's kind of like the purest form of mineralized water. And I had this discussion with a friend of mine, because he was telling me about I guess there's a website you can go on and enter your address or your code, and it will tell you where you can find springs around you. And he's like, no, you need to drink spring water. But I'm like, isn't like spring water, I'm sure, is great, but then we have the chemicals are spraying into the air. We have all the pesticides going into the earth. I would think that the way I'm doing it currently might be cleaner, doing distilling, taking everything out of the water and then adding back in with natural salt, as opposed to natural springs. What's your take on that?
So there's a great website. It's, I think, the Water Bearer, and he's got some great stuff on that about distilled water and that whole thing between distilled and spring. And yeah, it's very, it's challenging, right? Like in my opinion, I've done distilled for, I don't know, it's been like 8 years, I think, or so. It's been like 8 years. Yeah, it's been a long time. Been doing distilled for a long time. I can tell you as soon as I drink it, I know that that's the best water for my body. But if I did find a primary water spring, which I know of quite a few of them in Arizona, then I would just go to one of those and I could drink out of that, right? Because I know that that's the highest quality. It's like crystal clear blue. It's beautiful. It's kind of like you see those waterfalls up in northern Arizona. Those are primary water. That's why they're so beautifully blue. They have all that color and that essence to it. And like you said, it could be difficult depending on the spring near you, because I had a friend who went to findaspring.com, because that's actually the website. I had a friend who went to that website and it wasn't so good for them. And I think that's because that spring, unfortunately, I mean, I don't know what happened, but they said that there was some toxins in there and they didn't know until they found out there was like a chemical plant next to the spring. So, that's the issue in which we lie when we are going through some of these springs. They might not be primary water either. They might just be like a little aquifer, a little, pond or something, whatever else. So that's the trouble. So with distilling, yes, you are getting the purest water, 0 parts per million.
Yeah.
You know what it is, and you could remineralize it or you could restructure it very easily. And in my opinion, it's better to start with 0, right? Like, because it's easier in my opinion.
You can get it. Everybody listening, you can buy a little ppm tester on Amazon for $20, and you can test to see what the ppms are. So that way you're just cleaning the water completely. There's nothing in it. No toxins.
So you're not playing that guessing game. Like, that's kind of what it is. And, that's the other thing too. I was reading up even with the Kangen thing. Kangens, they use electrolysis, which is electricity, to create hydrogen, which actually is detrimental to water over time, right? Because you're using electricity to create that. Hydrogen can be naturally occurring. You can create it with just spinning. You don't even need any electric whatsoever. So the other thing too is with the Kangen is they don't filter heavy metals. So if you're getting fluoride and toxins and sewage to tap and all kinds of weird stuff through your water, you might be adding a little hydrogen or changing the molecular structure with ionizing and all this other stuff, but it doesn't work in the same fashion. That's why I advise, or not advice. I just, when it comes to it, if you're going to go with the purest, you could have distilled, but it just depends on somebody's home. If they need a whole house unit, sometimes it's harder to get the distiller unit in the house, and they do a reverse osmosis filter, and they could distill or they could structure it afterwards. But, it just depends on the person's situation. And that's why I started to learn, well, here's all the different options. And then you can do what's best for your family and your kids and what works best for you. And even if it's just starting off, I've told people just start with a gallon of distilled water from Whole Foods. Well, actually, they don't sell it anymore. But other places, just start with that like once a week and see how you feel. I guarantee your mental clarity and all your body will start to function better. And just go with how you feel. And maybe if you don't feel that you want it anymore, don't do it. Just do what your body naturally feels. But certain things will resonate with you very well and other things will not. And water, I think, is one of those where when we start to reconnect with water and, like you said, understand it and understand all of these toxins, it's a very different lifestyle, And when I went to, so years back, I went to Dubai and they had just like tap water and that's all. And it was supposedly whatever. I mean, I was like, my stomach felt like I was so bloated. I just couldn't even, I was like, please, I need to get home so I can get my distilled water now. Because the problem it was loaded with all these, I don't know what was in it, but I'm like, this isn't natural. It doesn't even taste good. It tastes horrible. Yeah. And it was just an experience that I had. But when I was drinking coconut water from when I was in India, when I drank coconut water and I did just pure coconut water for 2 months straight, holy cow, right? Because that's structured water, just like cucumber water, just like celery, just like all those things. So it's interesting because they can sell you all these fancy waters and this has got pH of 50 and whatever else, but it's like, it's probably just marketing, let's just go with that.
Absolutely. And I like I said, there's levels. I many times travel with, if I'm going to do a couple night or a road trip, I'll bring a couple gallons of my own water because that's how, I mean, when you are clean with water for so long and you drink tap water or something, you feel it. And I'm sure you know this too. If anybody starts distilling and you distill a gallon of water and you open your distiller and see what's in the bottom of that left over just from 1 gallon, it's this
Yeah.
disgusting, sludgy, yellowy. I mean, the smell is horrific. It
Yeah.
makes me sick to smell it. And I do one day want to actually take it to somebody to get that little bit left over tested to see what's actually in it. But if you do start distilling, you'll never want to actually touch tap water again. You won't even want it on your skin once you see what's left over just from distilling a gallon.
And that's the thing is like you look at distilling and they did it for thousands of years,
Yeah.
right? You look at alchemy, guess what they were doing distilling too as well with alchemy and then making, spiritucs and all those things too. They would burn it off and then burn it off and then burn it off and it would run through and it go through vortexes, right? And then it would create, and that's what Victor Schauberger was big on too. Water needs to spin, right? Water is always moving in a spiral every single time. So when you get rid of that and you create this water that no longer moves and moves in a straight line, and uses plastic pipes and all of these weird things, then the water has to work even harder and you're diminishing its life force as well too. So, that's the other thing is the spin part of the factor of the vortex is so crucial. And when they're just sending things through a tap or sending things through plastic pipes, then now you're getting rid of all of that. You're getting rid of that spin. And then the water is pretty much being diminished before it even comes out. And then, like you said, it's loaded with toxins. And it's interesting because when I was learning about the stuff with the structuring of the water, they were showing how when you structure water, you don't have to clean as much either too, because the mildew and all the stuff that gets all built up is no longer there because the water is structured and pretty much eliminates all of that. So it's like, so that's another industry that doesn't even really need to exist either. But these industries have been created because of changing just one thing. And that's the same thing when you take it even a step farther to GMOs. It's like if you alter one gene, who knows what you're altering,
Yeah.
And we really have to ask questions like if you change this and put the epicite gene, which is a gene to create people to make them sterile in corn, well, we need to know what that's going to do, right? Like before we even try to roll that out.
Yep.
So that's why, same thing with water, same thing with food, same thing with all of these things. We really have to look at the things that have been changed at the lower levels, the underlying levels, and understand that so that we can make improvements for our health. And then, like you said, change for the better.
Absolutely. And be really mindful of, all the new technologies as well, because I mean, all these new things coming into play, they are going to have an effect on our health in certain ways. And we just need to we need to know how to mitigate and, do our best to protect ourselves and to take our power back. Now you have a great line of superfoods, and I really love your line. And there was a few that were even new to me, so I want to kind of get into detail about 3 of them. So firstly, can you talk about why it's important to consume superfood supplements? And I know there's a narrative out there, just eat a healthy whole food diet, so you don't need to take any supplements. What's your take on that?
So the thing is we're deficient in a lot. So what I started understanding was certain organs and certain parts of the body need certain foods, right? So some things look like certain things, like a carrot looks like an eye, an orange kind of looks like, a walnut looks like your brain. Certain foods resemble certain things. So we need to consume certain things to basically bring back those nutrients. And the whole reason that we got so heavily into different superfoods to heal the body is because we are nutrient deficient, but there are pathways or different areas that need certain nutrients that we're no longer getting, right? So when you look at all these different superfoods, we do mushrooms, we do some herbs, we do different types of tree sap, we do shilajit, we do all these different types of things to all basically try to heal these pathways, which are basically becoming nutrient deficient, right? We can eat an all organic diet. We eat all organic all the time. I go to the farmer, I buy everything too. But also too, I don't feel that I'm getting all the nutrients that I once did. And it's just because, like I said, with all those practices we talked about in the beginning, those have all impacted our food quality. I know when I find high quality food, when I find a farmer who's been doing it the right way, I can taste it, right? I can still taste like a strawberry or a blueberry or something. You can actually still taste it, but that's very rare, because you'll go, like, for example, to maybe the market or even the grocery store, and it'll taste good the one time. And then you'll go back again and they're like, oh, all out of stock. All those ones are gone. And it's like, oh, well, so much for that. So all the nutrients that you're getting are limited to that extent of if the farmer is doing it the old school way, has the nutrients in the soil, doing it the organic way, understanding their soil, etc. And it's like, that's a hard thing. And then if you move into conventional foods, which are pretty much completely almost lifeless and have been zapped with radiation and all kinds of weird things as well too, now you're just bringing something toxic into the body. So superfoods can come in there and help alleviate some of those issues, and also just focus on if you're nutrient deficient in something, like let's say just magnesium or calcium or whatever, you want to get those things from a food source, right? We want to bring in things from a food source because they absorb into the body in the best way. The problem with any of these synthetic vitamins and all of these vitamins, and I was in the fitness world for a long time, I know all about it, I know everything about it, all that. The synthetic things in that, it's not easily absorbable into the body. Yes, it might make a difference today. Yes, you might get a little boost. Yes, you might drink some energy drink and you got some energy for that day. But the problem is that you're never feeding the underlying cause of the nutrient deficiency. So for example, you might drink a lot of caffeine because you're depleted in magnesium and your adrenals are not working anymore. So, we need to start looking back at eating things from food so that we can get all of the nutrients as one, and that we're not singling something out, because the whole system has singled things out, like, oh, I'm low on vitamin C, so I'll just eat vitamin C. Well, if you eat an orange, you eat the whole orange. You eat the skin, the seeds, the rind, everything, because all the nutrients are in that. You don't just eat the seed, because if you just ate the seed, you're only getting like a pinch of it. So that's kind of how I look at superfoods. It's like I can introduce foods into my body and get all the nutrients instead of just synthetic one thing. The other time too I've seen is with some of these synthetic vitamins and minerals is the companies who own them are also the same companies creating the poison. Absolutely. Right? They've been buying up a lot of different supplements and vitamin companies, and I think Zeolite and a bunch of different things that I've seen some crazy stuff on. So it's like you don't know who you're purchasing from. So I always say ask questions, find out who owns it, find out what their mission is. Do they resonate with those things? Because you might do some research to find out that you've been buying from Kellogg's this entire time, thinking you're buying some superfoods and whatever. But when we bring in things from the superfood level on the nutrient level, then we absorb them the best rather than synthetic things. And that's what I've noticed is people are suffering from deficiencies of certain nutrients. And as they bring in these superfoods, they pretty much heal. And that's it. And we get tons of messages, tons of emails, tons of whatever. And it's like, it's very, very simple. We just have to understand which pathways have been impacted and then which nutrients we're missing, and make sure that we're getting them in the right form, in a food form, so that they're so easy to absorb. That's the thing with a person taking a multivitamin, they'll know that they took a multivitamin because usually when they go to the bathroom, they know that it changes the color of their urine, and then it shows that they haven't absorbed any of it. Yeah. So, it's important to know that when you eat something from food, like a lemon, a lime, a peach, whatever it may be, you're absorbing all those nutrients. So that's why we are big on the superfoods and bringing in food-sourced nutrients rather than just synthetic, single, one line with a bunch of inactive ingredients, which usually block the ability for you to absorb that type of product.
Right. Our bodies are brilliant things that know how to break things down and know how to take what they need. We don't need a human creating fake vitamin C and all these different, pulling all these little microscopic things out and taking them. You mentioned Shilajit, which is the one I'm most familiar with. Can you kind of give an overview of what Shilajit is and a little bit of science behind it, and what are some of the benefits of it?
Yeah, so Shilajit is a superfood that comes out of the mountains. It's basically like the mountains are compressing themselves and there's soil and all this beauty that's up in the mountains, and they're pressing against each other and they create this like tar-like substance. And then we go to consume this tar-like substance and it gives us 84 of 102 minerals. So it's very healing for the body. It brings back all the minerals that we are missing. And we're actually working on some other stuff with Shilajit with another form as well too, which I'm excited to launch that soon. But in general, we're basically bringing back the nutrients that are missing into the body. Now, also with Shilajit is you have a lot of fulvic and humic acid. Those are detoxers, right? They go into the body and they pull everything out and they start to rebalance it. So if you're suffering from like heavy metal poisoning or just heavy metal toxicity that's sitting in the body, Shilajit can go in there and work its magic to help pull all that out of you as like a chelator and basically start to restructure the body. Because when you're holding all these metals, you basically become an antenna, right? You become an antenna to all the frequencies and everything around. And Shilajit can help balance all that out. Also, if you suffer from things with pain, if you suffer from brain fog, cognition, digestion issues, chronic fatigue syndrome, Shilajit works so well in all of those departments because you're bringing back the nutrients you don't have. I mean, that's the best way to say it, so that you'll start to notice your energy's better, you'll start feeling better. And whenever you do consume Shilajit, you want to make sure that you consume it with a form of fat, right? Because there are fat soluble vitamins in there. So, if you have it with a meal, if you have it with a coffee and some raw milk and some creamer, whatever it may be, if you could have it with a soup, whatever you want, but you want to make sure you have some sort of fat in there because there are a lot of fat soluble vitamins in there that also need to be absorbed as well. And that's the thing. There's fulvic acids out there. There's humic acids out there that are out on the market. But remember, you're only getting a single nutrient. You're only getting that single part, and you're not getting the full spectrum of the food. And that's where the Shilajit, you're getting the full spectrum and eating it from its real, from its natural pristine state, rather than a synthetic. We've now created and crafted something else over here and then sold it differently. And it's interesting because when you look at Shilajit and all of this, you look at people who used to live up on the mountains. They would consume it so that they could breathe better. They'd consume it so that they wouldn't be as tired. They could climb up the mountains for hours and do whatever. So it's like, maybe we need this because clearly my food is not doing any of that at the moment. Right. And we need these adaptogens to help balance out the body and just get us back into harmony so that we can function at our most optimized level. Because as we are nutrient deficient, also all of our brain and our digestion and our body all starts to break down as well. So Shilajit can work really well with that.
And you have two forms. You have, I think, a liquid form and a
tablet.
Tablet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have the two different forms, and I was going to say we have a liquid one right now, and then we have a tablet. And that's just based on ease of use, depending on what you feel.
There's not like a difference between taking one or the other. It's just preference, more or less.
Pretty much, because both of them are cold press extracted, and we're big on like our extraction process for them. But they're pretty much you will feel the same with both of them. It's just the tablets are just easier to use because you can travel and you can just pop them and go. And that was the main thing is, we're big on trying to figure out how we can keep upgrading our company and doing better things with our products, but also keeping that integrity of the product. And the whole thing with the tablet was just, we have a lot of people who travel all the time, and with liquids, it can be kind of just, it's troubling to, whatever, spill and whatever, just upside down and whatever. So we wanted to have something that's also the option. And if you don't want to have to, for example, measure out, 10 drops or exactly that or whatever, then you can just take a tablet, and it makes it very simple, because exactly, okay, I took one a day. This will last me, 120 days. And now I'm good, rather than, I don't know, I think I took it, I don't know, or the drinks, or I don't have a coffee ready. So it gives you different options.
Understood. Now you also have something called pearl powder and dragon's blood. And these are new to me. And I actually was watching your information on dragon's blood, and I've been having some skin issues on my hand recently. I kind of did a detox cleanse and suddenly got some skin issues, and you were talking about how it can help with that. I'm like, oh, so I started on Tuesday doing it topically 3 times a day, and it's almost gone.
Yeah.
And I've been living with it for 2 months. I've tried, I hadn't gone to the doctor yet. I haven't done the, because I practice what I preach, and I was trying all the natural stuff, but nothing was working. And I was like, what is going on? So the dragon's blood, by the first day, after the first day, I saw a huge difference. Like the inflammation went down, the itchiness, the scaly. It's almost gone. And then I decided, for all ladies out there, men too, I decided to do a facial with it. So I put some coconut oil, I mixed it up, and I did, like it's kind of like a little exfoliator and a scrub, and my skin was glowing afterwards.
Yep. And that's the magic of dragon's blood. Is, so if you want the history on the dragon's blood, it's an Atlantean tree, right? You go back to Atlantis time, and you go back to all of that history and everything else. But there's a tree called the Draco tree, and there's multiple different versions. You have ones in South America, you have them in the Azores, the Canaries, you have them in Yemen, and then you have a couple scattered throughout Asia as well too. They're all over the place. It's this tree that basically, when they would cut it, it would resemble blood. So they called it dragon's blood because the sap looked like blood. But the sap is pretty much like, in my opinion, it's like drinking maple syrup, right? It's the same thing. Maple syrup is the sap of the pine tree. Dragon's blood is the sap of the dragon tree. So what they noticed was that the dragon's blood itself has the highest ORAC value on the planet of over 3 million. So you have blueberries, which are about 50,000 on the antioxidant value. You have chaga, which is like 80,000, and you have dragon's blood, which is 2.9 million.
And what is ORAC value?
So the ORAC value is the antioxidant value of the food, right? So depending on, basically, we face oxidation all the time, right? All the stress and all the chaos and everything that we live in. And basically what they showed was with dragon's blood that it has the highest antioxidant value. So it starts to repair all that damage and stress and all the stuff that we face. So for example, when it comes to a skin issue, like you were talking about, what it's doing is it's regenerating the stem cells, right? Those cells that are pretty much basically being depleted. And when you start to place that topically on the hand, on the arm, whatever it is, it'll start to regenerate those right away. And they noticed this was when they were in the jungles of South America, when a person had a wound, they didn't have the Band-Aids and call somebody and tell me to come pick me up. They basically put dragon's blood and wrapped it around, and they noticed that the wound would heal within 24 hours. Wow. And so that was the ability for it. And because it looks like blood, it works very fast with our system. Because as soon as you rub it on, it pretty much goes away, like as if it's not there anymore, because it's absorbing so quickly. But they noticed that it was a great blood tonic. It was great at healing out and cleansing out the blood. It was great at healing H. pylori. It was also great at anything fungal, we'll go into that, all things. It can heal on so many levels there. Inflammation, neuroprotective, radioprotective. I mean, just so many different things. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know why we're not consuming this. Right. This needs to go into something, and we need to start bringing this stuff forward because this can help heal. Because, the biggest thing with the skin thing is it's like, like you said, well, what can you do? Right. Because you try every lotion, ointment, cream, whatever, you cover everything, and it's like, it's still here. And then you change your diet, still there, so the skin is different because I feel like the skin is always learning and always doing its thing. But when you implement dragon's blood, it's like that, it starts healing those areas because it's just absorbing in and then causing the cells to start regenerating. And that's why, if you look at it, I think it's, besides shilajit, it's one of the most studied plants on the planet for all of its regenerative properties. And so I was like, this has got to be, we got to have this, because this is something to help heal on the cellular level, and something that we all face, because like you said, the skin or anything, even with doing anything with the facial or even doing like the microdermabrasion or anything like that, you want something that helps regenerate that area because you broke it down, so dragon's blood works really well with that.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to me because of all the studies and the amazing properties. You're the first person I've ever heard speak of it, or the first place I've ever seen that carries it. You don't see it in really anywhere else. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, you see it in like smudging, or like stuff with with different types of work with smudging and like burning with candles and stuff. And I've seen it with a couple skin things, but I guess they never really stuck with it because, with some skincare products, they put a pinch and they're like, oh, we got dragon's blood in there, right, and whatever else. But I never saw it as like a edible way. And then when I found it, I was like, we got to source this and do this because this stuff's amazing. And, it puts you in a different mode too, as well, when you consume it. If you put it in a smoothie or if you put it in your coffee, right, or whatever, you just very tunnel focused vision, everything. And it's just, we need to really bring back these ancient superfoods because we're just missing out. It's like, it's kind of like this. You think about like in the holidays, everybody eats a pumpkin pie. You've been eating pumpkin pie for like 100 years. I don't think that pumpkin is the same anymore, in the fall. So it's like, we really need to implement other foods to make up for what we're missing. And that's where I feel dragon's blood or shilajit works really well on too.
Yeah, we definitely need to collaborate and come up with a skincare line with dragon's blood, because the result, I've done 2 facials with it so far and 2 like exfoliation, just masks with it, and it's incredible. So
yeah, I could definitely see that.
That's the next level. Now pearl powder. This is the next thing I'd like to try. I like doing one thing at a time when I'm adding things to my body and just giving it a minute. What is pearl powder? What's the benefits? How can it help our health and wellness?
Okay, so pearl powder is basically just pearls. Think about pearls, pearl necklace, pearl wristlets, pearl anklets, all of those things. Those are basically a very majestic, healing life force, right? That's basically what the pearl is. If you hold it in your hands, you can feel the frequency as soon as you touch them. That's why we were so connected. If you go back into Atlantean times, they were real connected with pearls too as well. And jewelry, right? And jewelry always resonates a frequency, and then a lot of those frequencies are very healing. And pearl is very healing as well, because pearl provides the body with carbonated forms of magnesium, calcium, selenium, and all different types of amino acids as well. And since it's in a carbon form, it's the easiest for the body to absorb. And that's the biggest thing that I try to say, because there's a lot of magnesium supplements out there. There's a lot of calcium, magnesium, or calcium supplements, a lot of selenium supplements. But the problem is that they're never in the proper form, or that they're not in a food source. So it's very hard for the body to absorb. Right. So I had a lady, she messaged me. She's like, I heard about calcium carbonate, but every time I would use it, I'd feel sick. And I said, because it's synthetic calcium carbonate. It's not in a food source. And they also put a lot of fillers or inactive fillers in there so that you can't absorb the calcium. So right. That's why a lot of people have a lot of issues. Now, on the flip side, when you go to consume pearl, it instantaneously absorbs right into your body because it's a food source, and it goes right into the body. And you'll start to notice that your brain will work better. You'll start to notice your digestion will work very well because it's a prebiotic, because it balances out the gut flora. If you're suffering from inflammation, pain, if you're having eye issues, right, because it's the same. Pearls, if you look at a pearl, it's the same as the eye. It provides the same nutrients to the eye as well. So because people are suffering from all these blue lights and LEDs and they're harming the eye needs nutrients, and pearl can come in there and help heal the eye. If people go to Google, they can look up pearls and cataracts and see how there were studies that were actually done on those two things where people's eyes started healing with the use of pearl powder. And I thought that was fascinating because I'm like, wow, that kind of solved all our eye issues. And then the other cool thing about pearl is that when in the Mayan culture, when they used to lose a tooth, they would actually put a pearl in their mouth because it was exactly the same DNA as the tooth. So they could just replace them and put pearls in their mouth, and then they had brand new teeth. And it's interesting too, because if you think of the tooth industry, they put plastic and mercury and toxins in your mouth.
It sounds a lot healthier than all that.
We could be just using pearls, and pearls are very strong, so they can be done that way. But it's fascinating because there's also a lot of selenium in there, and there's a lot of amino acids to help heal the skin and the connective tissue. So what happens is related back to dragon's blood, that helps with the stem cells, but pearl also helps heal the connective tissues, which are being broken down on the skin. And those little in-between parts, I think they're called fibroblasts. Pearl helps to regenerate those. And then pearl also helps to regenerate glutathione levels, which is really important because that relates to your liver and your whole basically ability to detox and function, right? And there were some great studies on that. But pearl is a magical one because it just puts you in the mode, but it also balances out your GABA and serotonin and dopamine levels, which I think is really important because those are always altered, right? They're always being imbalanced by, highs and lows. So social media, YouTube notifications and stimulants and sugars, and pearl can actually help balance that out. So if a person's suffering from any type of sleeping issues or insomnia, pearl can help before bed. It will just knock you out. And we get hundreds of messages on that one about how I take pearl before bed and I'm just out. And it's because it's just balancing things. When we have that balance, then the body starts to go back into its normal state. And it's just fascinating because that's another one. When I got into pearl, I was like, wow, the healing properties, this is remarkable, and your skin, especially, and your liver and your eyes and your teeth and your bones, right? When we take all these calcium and magnesium supplements, if they're not in the right form, it just builds up in the body and you're building up calcium and all kinds of stuff all over the place. Whereas if you're taking it from a food source, you actually start to heal and you absorb it. So you don't have to have all this buildup and welts and whatever else. So that's why when I got into pearl, I was like, this is definitely another one that we have to bring out so that we can heal at a different area. Because each of our different superfoods and each formula that I keep coming up or trying to understand or new product, it's just understanding, okay, what are we maybe potentially deficient in and how can we help heal that area? And what is that area suffering from? It must be suffering from some deficiency in some nutrient that our food is not providing. And same with your skin. If your skin was not healing in that area, something is missing. Like no matter what you're bringing in or your diet, something is obviously missing in that area because it's not being able to regenerate. And that's where these superfoods can come in and help get that stuff going again so the body can be at its most optimized level.
Right. Yeah, the pro powder sounds incredible. It sounds like it's great for anti-aging, and
Yes.
war on dopamine is real. So yes.
Yes. Well, and the thing is too, what you just said with the anti-aging, it's like when you look at the people who used to consume a lot of the stuff, if you go into Shilajit, if you go into Dragon's Blood, if you go into Pearl, if you go into a lot of things, like even we're doing a black ginger product next, a lot of this stuff was consumed by royals, right? Royals were consuming these things. They're emperors, royals, kings, queens, Cleopatra, all of these people, all of these people were consuming this stuff. The only difference is now everybody can consume it, right? Everybody should have the option to it. It doesn't have to be just held within, certain families and lineages and whatever else. But that was a lot of the secrets that just are not talked about. Because when I started researching all this, I'm like, oh, so Alexander the Great, whoever, I'm like, oh, you all were eating this? That's fascinating. You all ate Shilajit? Like you all knew about it? And it's like they did because of the healing potentials, but then other people were just not ever taught or aware because they kept it within these little secrets, in my opinion. And that's why I've tried to bring out as much of that forward so that we don't have to have that, because I think there should be solutions for everything.
And we so appreciate that. And I'm so excited to try pro powder next, and I need to get the Shilajit incorporated too. And you also have a great assortment of mushroom powders as well. It's incredible. You have all the great ones. We did a show on the benefits of mushrooms a few months back, and I'll post a link to that below if any of you missed it. But he has all the best mushrooms and in powder form, I believe. Is that
yes, they're all in powder form, and now we're starting to do capsules, and we're doing everything soon in capsules as well too, because we want to provide options and different options. Because even with powders, same thing, it's fun, but a capsule is also easier and travel friendly, or for children, because a lot of people give them to their children. Sometimes just giving them a capsule is actually easier than powder and applesauce and disguising or whatever, like what they're trying to put it into. So just different options.
And you have the lion's mane, the cordyceps, the reishi.
Yep. Yeah, we have lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi. We also have tremella, which is a cool one. That's another skin mushroom. And then we have our 6-mix blend, which is probably one of my favorites. And that has a Mishima mushroom in there. And that's a very rare ancient mushroom that was used to pull radiation out of the body. So as we were suffering from all of these cell phone towers and nonsense that we face, I wanted to put that mushroom specifically in our 6-mix blend to help balance the body from the radiation that we all face as well too, because there was an island next to Japan when they dropped all the stuff and did whatever they did that was basically untouched. And they were so confused while the people were basically untouched. And they found out that those people were consuming Mishima mushroom from the mulberry plant. It's the mushroom that grows on the mulberry. And they basically saw that they didn't have any radiation toxicity, poisoning, nothing. So I thought that needs to be in a 6-mix in our blend specifically so that we can have an option for all of this nonsense that we face and have something that will help balance out the body with that as well too. Because all these mushrooms can provide different things, but the Mishima one pretty much got me. And I was like, okay, and I was suffering from a lot of radiation poisoning back in the day, like 2019. I lived in a building with cell phone towers inside of it. And that mushroom helped me get back on track because I was basically cooked. I was like microwaved and didn't realize it until I bought a meter. And I was like, oh my gosh, stuff is in the walls. Like, how is this legal? And I remember I even challenged the building and said, whatever, like a lawsuit and whatever. And they're like, yeah, we have our lawyers ready. And I was like, wow, so then. Because even to respond like that just means you already know that it's there. So it's like, okay, got you. So, it was a really big wake-up call. But now it's about being aware and finding solutions and healing and everything because, there are solutions to everything. We just got to find them. That's kind of
right.
awesome.
And we're living in an EMF soup if we're living in any sort of city. And these are great solutions that you have that can help us detox from the EMFs and other issues that are going on with our food and water and soil. For those that want to contact you and check out your products, how can we do so? And do you have any other great resources we can all check out?
Of course. So with that, if they want to find us, they can find us on cultivateelevate.com. Hold on one second. Cultivateelevate.com. And then they can also find us on Instagram at Cultivate Elevate. It will say, are you sure you want to follow this false and misleading information after I just told you all these things? So just so people do see that. And then we also have Cultivate Elevate 2, which is our backup page. And then on Telegram, we have Cultivate Elevate, and YouTube, Cultivate Elevate. They can find us on all of those different platforms. And I put out all of these things in different solutions and blogs and tons of information. As for the topics that we just talked about, we have a blog called Elecrtoculture for Beginners, which goes through different videos of series of how they can start and basically start to implement it. There's also a book on there, and I'm writing a book, which will also be added to that as well. So that's with Elecrtoculture. And then if you go into primary water, there's the primarywaterinstitute.org. You can also type in primary water into our website, and we have a bunch on that too. Or you can look up the book New Water for a Thirsty World, and that goes into that as well. And that's the thing. I try to provide as many books as possible so that people can also learn and read. And I'm big on books because, digital is a great way to connect, but reading is when you just fully absorb everything. So I try to put out as many different books also on these topics that people can read as well. But those would be those on primary water. And then if you want any information on our products, we have all the studies on every product. We put all the studies that I can find that are up to date. And I always try to find new ones, but of each product, what every product does, and the studies that are behind that as well too. So you can see them, look them all up, compare if you're, whatever it may you feel that you're suffering from, one of those might resonate and you can understand, okay, that can make sense. Because I think it's good to give sources of everything and provide as many options for people so that they can learn as well too, so that they can teach others. Because we can sit here and have all the chats and talk all we want, but it also needs to go out so that other people can learn and then teach other people as well, so that we get out of this perpetual nonsense that we always deal with. Because the only reason we keep dealing with it is because everybody keeps forgetting over here. And we have to start learning these things so that we can get out of that, and then we can make changes as a whole. That's kind of how I see it.
Absolutely. So well said. I will post links below to all of your contacts. I highly recommend checking out his products, his website. There's so much great information on there. And his Instagram, follow him there. It's just constant, incredible tips and advice, and all about some amazing new products that they're coming out with as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, Matt, and sharing your wisdom and knowledge, and, sharing how we can take better care of our Mother Earth, as well as improve our own health. And thank you as well for all this incredible work and research you're doing to empower others through knowledge, and as well with your line of superfoods.
Happy to be here. Happy to bring it all out and just, provide some solutions, because like I said, it gets old, the nonsense gets old, and I just want to provide solutions to help, because I feel like that's what's needed. And also too, I realize if somebody learns something, they need to share that as well. That I think is really important, because the other issue that we sometimes face is we might learn something and not maybe say something to others, and that can work against us as a society. We need to bring the information out. So if you read some book on free energy, free technology, whatever it may be, something or whatever, you should share that as well, because that's what makes changes. And that's what's changed everything from 2020 till now, is even just us coming together right now doing this conversation, and so many other people doing the exact same thing. That makes the change, instead of us holding back and not saying, the stuff that we know.
Absolutely. We need to get out of the fear of censorship, the fear of, cancellation, all this stuff, and speak our knowledge and speak our wisdom and listen to our own inner authority.
I agree.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about your body, the better you're able to stay healthy and prevent disease. And a reminder, I'm not your doctor. Please don't take this as medical advice. If you have specific questions about your own healthcare, feel free to reach out to your practitioner. And if you like this video, please like and share with others. This information could really help someone you may know. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to be sure you don't miss out on our future shows. And I will see you all next Wednesday on our next episode of Discovering True Health.